So I'm Linda from Poseidon Animal Health, and I'm so grateful that you've all showed up tonight. Joining me tonight is the amazing Nikita Stowers, who is 2 hours ahead of us, coming to us from New Zealand. And Nikita is an incredible equine nutritionist who has this amazing business in New Zealand where her and her business partner, who is a vet, have got a great reputation and a lot of experience in working around horse nutrition across all the disciplines. Actually, you know what? Rather than me saying it, Nikita, how about you just talk about briefly what you do?
That was a nice little intro. Thank you, Linda. And hi, everybody. Thank you for joining us tonight. I'm based in New Zealand. I'm an equine nutritionist and I work in the field. I started up a little consultancy with a veterinarian colleague of mine in 2016. And we just basically work in the field to help educate horse owners, but also to help them kind of uncover and unravel some of the myths around feeding horses and what's in our feeds, help you to balance diets and things. So yeah, we work with mostly clients in New Zealand, but also overseas. Any questions, I'm happy to try and help throughout the evening as well.
Good. Thank you, Nikita. And a huge shout out to Horseland. We are loving the partnership that we have and working closely with Horseland. And gosh, I've had horses most of my life and I have spent lots of time and money at Horseland. So it's pretty exciting to be doing this webinar in consultation with them. So thank you so much for this opportunity. And we're hoping that all of you that have come along tonight will learn lots. I said, I'm from Poseidon Animal Health and our business started about, 6 years ago. And it came about as a result of my own journey around learning about gut health and having a really life-threatening illness. And even though I've got a master's in health, I never knew about gut bacteria. So have learned so much and then applied it to horses. And we've just gone from strength to strength. And we love Poseidon, not just delivering amazing products, but we want to educate. So when we learn, new things, new content, new research, we'll jump in and do webinars so we can share that with you because we all love our horses. We spend so much time and effort and money with our horses. We want to make it, a win-win for horse and owner. So as we go through tonight, so if you have any questions, pop them in the chat box. We'll do our very best to answer them. If not, please drop us an email. If we run out of time, we can actually summarize the questions and send them through the email so that you don't miss out. So let's get started. What are we going to cover? We've got just on an hour and we'll try and make sure we make this time, as useful as possible. We will talk a little bit about gut health and what it actually means. Understanding gut health helps you understand the way we should be feeding our horses, how and the why behind it. So as a horse owner, it's really important to understand the gut is so much more than just the stomach, but we're really focusing on stress. And as horse owners, the more we can understand the impact of stress and on the gut, we can then start to understand how do we prevent and manage the effects of stress. The reality is horses are still going to be competed. We're going to travel them. We're going to compete. We will still put them under stress. But how do we manage that? And doing it differently rather than just relying on so-called calming pace. And finally, at the end, I want to talk a little bit about our product range. I'm sure most of you have heard about our products to really understand what's the science behind them and when you would use them. I always share this slide. It's really important for me to be able to express to you how seriously we take our role. You trust us. You've come along tonight. You've given us some time. You are wanting to learn from us. You want to buy our products. We've got to make sure that we deliver the best quality products at every level, but also education. So I really would hope that everyone after tonight knows that they can pick up the phone, they can jump on Facebook, they can email us and ask questions. And also know that when they use our products, there is so much best practice behind it in terms of research and formulation and manufacturing. And Nikita, as such a reputable equine nutritionist, will be able to talk about why she also loves our products. We take that really seriously. And then finally, the most important one is that you get off the webinar and you just feel a bit more confident. I don't know about you, but I used to be constantly overwhelmed. What to feed, how do I do that? How do I manage ulcers? Oh, it was just, the confidence wasn't there. But if we keep it simple and give you the tools and the confidence, it just changes everything. And we can also stop wasting so much money. But first, segue. We are going to have a couple of prizes at the end of the webinar as a thank you for joining in. And Horseland have very generously offered a time-limited 10% off their range tomorrow. So we'll talk about it more at the end, but you have to stay to the end to get the code. Now, this quote is an amazing quote that I'm actually going to try and see if I can move my screen. Those horse owners, we actually do owe it to our horses to be able to manage and reduce stress, because we do ask a lot of them. And we'll talk tonight about so many of the problems that horses are experiencing are very much human-made. So clearly, you've shown up tonight. You've given up your time. I've got an amazing team of responsible horse owners joining us. But again, it's about getting the confidence, understanding how to do that. Because the reality is our horse's life is stressful in so many ways. And we have deviated so far away from what used to be normal for them. And I'll talk a little bit later on about, evolution, and that the horses haven't really caught up with the stresses we've placed on them. So again, stress is not the same for every horse. And we'll talk about how does stress show up and what do we mean by stress. But modern life is stressful for the horse. Now, what we're sharing tonight really is the tip of the iceberg. I went to an amazing conference last year looking at stress and the gut, and we'll share some of those findings in a moment. But we're just starting to understand this. And so what we do know, we're sharing, but there's so much more. And we'll talk a little bit about gut bacteria as well, where that all, what role they play. And again, there's trillions of microbiome in the gut, and we only know about 2% of bacteria. So still so much to learn, but what we do know gives us great capacity for change. One thing we do know, and we'll talk about this a lot tonight, is stress is not just anxiety. That is one of the biggest myths that we want to bust tonight. And we'll talk more and more that horses are flight animals. They don't always want to tell you they're stressed. And so as horse owners, we miss some of those cues at times. So we'll keep referring to this as we go through, that a horse can be looking completely calm on the outside, but there's stress absolutely happening on the inside. So that's just a peek of what we're covering. So let's dive in. I'm going to hand it over to Nikita now so she can talk about what the gut is, how does it all work, and why it's so important when it comes to stress.
Thanks, Linda. So yeah, this point around stress, we're really starting to understand more about it as the years go by. But just to put it into perspective, for example, if you look at, for say, dairy cows, you've got lots of dairy cows in Australia as well, don't you, Linda?
Yeah.
Where you can really measure something like stress, because they immediately, when a cow is stressed, they'll immediately drop their milk production, right? So the farmer is really quick to react to that, because obviously there's a monetary incentive for them to produce milk. As horse owners, it's so much harder, because we don't have those measures in place where there's, where we're making money essentially and things like that. But we do have performance measures, and that's something that's really emerging, which is quite good for us as horse owners, is that we can start to say, oh, this change in performance here is possibly related to stress, and what is causing that stress, and we're going to kind of unravel some of that tonight. So the reason why gut health is so critical in terms of managing stress is basically because of how the horse's gut is designed and what they're designed to eat. And then what we kind of put into them, it changes things around a little bit. So the horse is what we call a hindgut fermenter. So that means that they're designed to eat lots of fiber, good quality fiber, but very fibrous based feeds. And what we do as horse owners is we often change that. So we start meal feeding them. We put them into stables for periods during the day or during the night. We have periods where they don't have food available, and all of these things are really unnatural for the horse. So they all can cause stress on the horse's gut. And one of the things that we do really commonly is feed grain or starch-based feeds as well. And that is one of the biggest things, as we'll cover tonight, that can really cause stress on the horse's gut. So the horse's gut, just quickly, is made up of lots of different parts, but we can look at it in two parts. Essentially, we look at the foregut, which is made up of the stomach and small intestine. This is a relatively small part of the horse's digestive tract compared to the huge hindgut. And this is where all of the grain-based feeds, fats and oils, most of our proteins and things are actually digested. And then if we move on to the hindgut, that's where all of our fiber-based feeds are digested. And this is huge. And the horse has this really well-developed cecum that just houses trillions of bacteria, protozoa, fungi that help the horse digest indigestible fiber. They house like all these bugs back there in their hindgut, and they get to live in there basically for free if they give the horse energy. So the horse has to basically eat truckloads of fiber every day to convert that fiber to energy so that they can do all the things that we're asking of them. So if you just think about the horse's gut quite simply like that, then it actually makes sense why we should feed them small meals of starch-based feeds and grain-based feeds, but lots of fiber. So yeah, just to give you a bit of background into why the gut is so important, first of all.
That's that, Nikita, that one of the things I think is really interesting around looking at stress, if we talk about that hindgut where so much of the fermentation happens, that I try and keep it really simple by saying you've got really helpful bacteria and they create the magic. And when we talk about magic, it's energy, it's the B vitamins, and B vitamins for appetite and behavior, and B vitamins for hoof condition and all those things. So they keep that gut wall intact. And then you've got the not so helpful bacteria that create lactic acid that will create the inflammation and also kill the good guys. So it's really, if we keep thinking about the good guys create the magic, the bad guys create inflammation. Very clearly, we want to have the good guys, completely outweighing. And when it comes to stress, which we'll talk about later, we know that can create that shift fairly quickly. And so then, you look at this amazing picture, if the gut's up to 30 meters long and you suddenly get inflammation, ouch, ouch, pain.
Yeah, absolutely. And the other thing as well is it's very quick to make those changes in a negative way when we, stuff something up. Basically, if we, feed them too much grain or they put under stress, and those environments can change really rapidly. Yeah. Unfortunately, then it takes a long time for us to get back to that good environment again and get those good bugs in there. But, fortunately for us, now we have amazing supportive supplements like Digestive EQ, for example, that will work its magic back there and help us more quickly. I've been working with a racehorse in the field that's actually come off the track. The client switched it to a fiber-based feed straight away. That was fine. But the really quick change to that horse's diet caused some problems in the hindgut, even though they were going to a better diet. And what we see is when we put something in like EQ into the diet, we will basically speed up the process of establishing good bacterial populations again. So it's really good. Like in a perfect world, we could just do it with fiber. But like you say, we're putting our horses under all of these stresses that aren't natural. And so we have to kind of, like you say, get used to the idea that we've created a lot of this. And so we have to give them extra support. So.
Yeah, excellent. Okay, that's really helpful. And just one last thing, when you see how complex the gut is, and it does so much, which we'll jump to in a moment, you can see when it comes to supplements like EQ, is that you just can't have one ingredient. It can't just be relying on a probiotic, which we don't use, we'll talk about later, but it's got to be that whole approach because the whole gut is really important.
Yeah, so we've kind of established why the gut is so important. But if you look at all of these things that are listed here on your screen, we see that gut health has an impact on such a huge array of things that are going on in the horse. So it's not just about digesting food anymore. We know that it's got a huge impact on immunity for the horse and its ability to fight disease. Obviously, behavior is a huge thing, performance and recovery, and that's something we're going to cover, you know, for example, with stress paste and the positive impact that it can have on those things. And our faces are in the way of some things, so I'm just moving that. Yeah, other things like you mentioned, Linda, B vitamins. A lot of people, you know, quickly reach for hoof supplements and things, for example, whereas if our hindgut was in perfect working order, then we actually create a lot of the things that we need for things like hoof health without the need for additional supplementation. Appetite is a huge one. And as soon as we, you know, put some stress onto our horse and that causes shifts in the gut, we get those decreases in appetite. And we see it all the time when our horses are at events or traveling and they all of a sudden go off their feed, and it's just then a cascading effect in terms of performance and recovery and all those things, because as soon as they stop eating, they also stop drinking. And we know that the bugs in the hindgut, they're basically like fish. They can't live out of water. So we need fiber, we need water in there, and we need those bugs to be flourishing in order for everything to work in the horse. Yeah, so the three major gut functions that we will briefly cover tonight. And we all know that the gut is there primarily to digest and utilize food. So for the horse, this should be mostly fiber-based feed, and then in turn that can get converted into energy for the horse to use or to store as fat to use later. So how it does that is it houses these trillions of bacteria, as I mentioned. And they have a huge role even outside of digesting and utilizing food. And then the other thing that the gut does, and this is a really kind of new and emerging area, especially in horse nutrition. It's a little bit more established in other species and in humans. But we're starting to talk about this thing called leaky gut. And so that's basically keeping the bad things out and keeping the good things in. And we know that when we have this leaky gut scenario, we're getting bad things basically going into our horse's bloodstream. And this is, causing a whole lot of things to go wrong. And you might want to add to that as well, Linda. I know it's something you're really passionate about.
Yep. Yeah. I've got another slide further on. I'll talk a bit more about it. Yeah. Thank you. I think the good thing to know from this is that we just tend to think it's all about number one, but it's not. And this is where the opportunity for change gets exciting, because once you understand the role of 2 and 3, my favorite word I use in the office is game changer, but it literally is a game changer. And you talked about the horse that's out competing and it's this cycle of they don't eat, they don't drink, they get stressed, then boy, the owner gets stressed. There is nothing worse. And I'm sure we've all experienced it. You know, you've gone to an event, you've paid a fortune, you've trained, you've gotten there, day 2, they're not eating. And then, in the old days, I would then go and buy any type of food I could get as long as they would eat, not realizing that by adding all these new feeds, I was stressing the gut more and making it worse. But you feel so, I guess, out of control, whereas understanding 2 and 3 helps you take the control back. And ideally, when you're out competing and you're managing the stress, then nothing changes. And that's what we're seeing.
Yeah, and one of the key things about when you are traveling, quickly, is to make sure that you do keep things the same, because we're changing enough already. And the amount of times that, I've been helping out on trade stands and things, and I've had, riders come up and say, oh, I thought I'd try this at this event, so-and-so gave me a sample of this feed. It's the worst possible time to try a new feed, because you don't want to be, having your horse having to transition to things, because basically every time you put a new feed into the system, the horse's bugs in the gut have to first kind of transition and adjust, and we need the new bugs to arrive that can digest that food. So we really want to try and keep things as the same as we can whilst we're out competing.
That's really interesting, because in the last 4 days, I've tried a new fiber product, and it's a fermented type of product, and there's 2 different types of hay in there, and I've just done it very slowly. But one of the girls that working for me said, Linda, I've noticed the manure's changed a bit. It's a bit smaller and a bit drier. And she was a bit concerned. I said, isn't it interesting? A small amount is enough for the gut bacteria to have to kind of repopulate, work out the pecking order, who's in charge. And even though I've added something amazing product with so many benefits, and I've done it slowly, the manure changed already, and my horses have incredibly great gut health. You would hope they would. But even then, you could see the change in the back end, because once you start to change the microbiome, then it changes the whole, water being put across the gut wall until they get to establish themselves. So that was change, even though I did it properly with a fiber-based product, let alone in the old days when I would go to an event and go, that hay looks good. Could have been oat and hay. I might not have ever fed oat and hay before, but it looks good. I'm sure they'll like that. And then wonder why they're girthy, they're cranky, they're kicking out at their transitions, all those things. So I'm glad you mentioned that.
Yeah, and not to mention that they might be, not performing as well if they're given new feeds, because they actually can't convert that feed to energy straight away. So that takes a while, like you say. So when you say, oh, my horse has been flat at this event, but I bought the hay that they had there instead of taking my own, and you start to think, what's caused this? So yeah. Is this still me, Linda, or is this you?
It's still you.
Sorry, I got my slide numbers wrong. So just quickly, amino acids for gut health, because amino acids are present in your amazing products. And it's so great because they're actually missing from a lot of gut health products that we see. We often see buffers and things like that we expect to see in gut health products. But there are actually certain amino acids. We often think of them as, the building blocks for muscle. And that's primarily why we feed protein-based feeds. But there are actually certain amino acids that will help not only with the gut wall, but also with the microbiome itself. Glutamine, for example, will actually help the microbiome and helps with that gut wall integrity. And you guys might be able to see those pictures of the healthy gut and the leaky gut. And if you think about the healthy gut as like a nice strong wall, it's helping keep that nice and strong and keep the bad things out, like we were speaking about before. We've also got threonine, which helps keep the a healthy mucus layer, which is also really important from a protective point of view. These amino acids that are in these products aren't actually in many gut health supplements that I'm aware of. So, but the horse does need them, and especially when we're putting the horse under stress, we can deplete those protective layers, and we can start to get those gaps in the gut wall. So we really need to provide those to help protect them against the stresses that we are putting them under, whether that be by feed or transport or at events or however we're causing that stress.
Explain that so well. It's all about that. If you come back to that, that third point, it's the biggest immune organ, keeping bad things out and good things in. So I used to use the analogy like a castle and a moat. So the mucus laying's the moat, and then the castle wall with the bricks and mortar is the next part of the gut. And just on the aminos, one of the things that our products, we don't make any excuse about that. They are premium quality products. We have high levels of aminos, and they are actually really expensive. And people will say there's other gut products that are cheaper. Yeah, they are. They don't have the same level of aminos. They are really important around this gut wall. And now we know the more stress, the more amino acid support you need, which is why we've got the new Racing Performance product, which we'll talk about later. So I'll jump in here, Nikita.
Oh.
So I think we've just sort of been talking about the impact of stress and what stress does to the gut. And that's really crucial. So if you think about that slide earlier where I said stress is not just anxiety, it absolutely isn't. This leaky gut we're talking about can be happening and you don't even see it until it can become really catastrophic. But let's just put it in perspective. And I think this is an amazing slide that another incredible nutritionist put together for me. And it's basically looking at really simply, horses have been around for a while, and Mother Nature has made this animal that every part of it is designed to be walking and eating and just never having the stomach empty. We did some training at work today about the stomach and talking about how the top part of the stomach is actually not protected because it was never meant to be empty. Yet horses are making stomach acid all the time with an empty gut. You know, the acid splashes up. And it's almost like the stresses that we've placed on them, there hasn't been time for that evolutionary change. You would hope that over time, maybe the top part of the stomach will get some mucosal support or another, you know, some more support from the acid. But again, if you think about the change, then we're responsible for that. And for us, once we know better, we can do better. So what do I mean by stress? And look, this is a fairly wordy definition, but for me, the words that jump out of this is unpredictable and uncontrollable and exceed. So we put our horses in situations all the time, but when it's unpredictable and when it's uncontrollable, we're creating more stress. And they may have a certain capacity. And it's interesting, we go back to the gut bacteria. We know that the gut is designed to have your starch digested in the small intestine, as Nikita mentioned, and you've got bacteria in the hindgut that love fibre. Then you've got the other ones that love starch. But there's also these other little bacteria that's been set up so that there is an overflow of starch and there's lactic acid made. They can take that and make it usable. But when you exceed it, and it becomes too much, they can't do that. So we've now exceeded the horse's ability to cope naturally. So if we think about horses that are flight animals and they can't hide because they're too big, so they've got to run, that they're so wired to be able to assess situations and to be able to get away. So we think about the things we do for our horses. We put them in floats, we put them in trucks. You know, it's often unpredictable and uncontrollable, and Nikita's going to take us through that in a moment. If you keep thinking about that, then how do we then manage unpredictable, uncontrollable environments? And knowing that just because they're not showing you they're anxious on the outside, there are changes happening. And we're talking about psychological and physiological. And we'll go through those again in a moment. But again, really interesting. And the horse does have so many abilities to cope. You know, in winter, they grow a woolly coat. They can cope with that. But then if it's really, really cold, how do we manage that? So it's about knowing what they are capable of doing. But when we exceed that capacity, it's having an impact. And this is where we talk about leaky gut. And as Nikita said, I love talking about this because it's just changed everything for me, thinking about, and I use the analogy around tight shoelaces. If the gut has to keep bad things out, it's got to be tight, but it's got to be fine enough to let the good things in. So what we know, and this is the information, that if you've got high performance horses, or any horse really, but we know that once the gut is opening up and you're getting this term leaky gut, that only happens when there's been some sort of stress happening. So the hindgut's now stressed, more acidic, you've got less good gut bacteria, and pathogens and toxins that hang out in the gut all the time. It's almost like party time, it's our chance. So they, as the gut opens up, they go through. Now the body has to mount an inflammatory response because they're under attack. And there's some research to show that almost once that first mucosal lining starts to get eroded, it's like a warning system. It's like the body's now, hey, pending attack. So the inflammatory response starts to happen. Every horse is different. It may show up as a skin condition. It may show up as a mild bout of colic. They're all different. But just know that once the gut opens up, a few things happen. The horse then uses energy to fight that immune response. If you're a show jumper, if you're an eventer, if you're a horse that's going to use power and performance, if you're a racehorse, you want to conserve all that energy for performance and recovery. But now it's being diverted to coping with an immune response. But secondly, is the body now has to take energy to close the gut. And Nikita mentioned that amazing research around the dairy cattle. And that was about, they withheld food for 6 hours. That was the stress. And even when they accounted for less digestible energy, milk production dropped nearly 50% because it could be measured. So it's almost like, don't fool yourself. If you are putting your horses under stress, just know that precious energy that you need for performance is now being diverted to closing the gut and then coping with inflammation. So that's why we love talking about this, because for me, there's also the safety issue, there's the welfare issue. If the leaky gut's happening and you've got 30 meters of gut, ouch, they're in pain. And, the horse that started Poseidon was this beautiful off-the-track thoroughbred that couldn't get his right canter leads. I didn't understand about the cecum sitting on the right-hand side and how it can get inflamed. I didn't understand that. That's the same horse that, would go away to shows and he wouldn't eat and he'd lose weight. And it was all gut stress. And I often say to people, what's your horse like going to the right? Now, it can be other things, I get that. But 9 times out of 10, people will say, oh, yeah, really bad going to the right. Are they girthy? Yes. Well, the hind gut is where the girth is. What are they like when you brush them at the back end? Are they flinching? And they'll say, yeah, when I do the rugs up, they put their ears back. And I often say to people, I don't know what you're like, but when I've got, if I've eaten a really big meal and I'm bloated and I've got a sore stomach, if I go and put on a tight pair of jeans and a belt and then piggyback someone, they say, come on, off we go, I'm going to be shuffling and not very happy. So, I don't want to make light of it, but we have to understand that transport, performance, as Nikita said, change of diet, change of weather, heat, cold can all impact on the gut. And one last thing, because I could talk about leaky gut for the whole time, is that things like heat stress. When a horse is really hot and they'll heat up really quickly, then obviously the blood goes to release the heat. Now, what happens is that blood is taken away from the gut. And so it's not getting what it needs to stay intact. So heat stress and leaky gut's a thing. And we'll talk later about an amazing product called betaine that we put in our stress paste to keep the gut hydrated. So again, understanding this leaky gut is a real thing. If this is happening, it's also very likely that all your good bacteria are diminishing as well. So you're now getting poor appetite, bad behavior, all the other things that go with it. So there's a lot to it, but, I'm hoping you're sitting there going, wow, this is amazing. I didn't know about this. And now, we can start to understand what are some of those major common stresses and what do we do about it? So back over to you, Nikita.
Thank you, Linda. And just to add to that as well, I don't know if you guys are seeing a lot of this over the last few years, but we're seeing a lot more kind of allergic responses and things like that as well. And what appear is, my horse is allergic to this feed, to this feed, to this feed. And what we're starting to realize is that they may be like in a leaky gut scenario, that will appear as an allergy. But if we can actually correct that, then at a different point in time, if you put that same food into a healthy gut, then they may not exert that same response. So it might not be a case of, I can't feed my horse this, this, and this, which we're seeing a lot more of. It might be at the moment you can't because of the state that your horse's gut is in. But if we get that right, then you can, actually utilize those feeds, because we're getting it to, grasses, to all sorts of pastures that people have always fed, and all of a sudden their horse can't have it anymore. And it seems to be because the state that the horse is in. So don't stress that you might have to remove your horse from the earth and feed it nothing.
I think even that, sometimes people say, my horse can't eat lucerne. Now, lucerne sensitivity is quite uncommon. So it is, and I love lucerne. It's such a great feed. So, when they say that, I go, well, tell me, why do you think it's having a reaction to the lucerne? Did you introduce it too quickly? What else is going on? So I'm so glad you brought that up. And again, if you're listening to this and going, wow, this is amazing, and you need more advice, then Nikita does offer these professional services where she can look at your diet, give you advice and make the changes, because we want feeding simple and effective. Okay, so.
Right, so we're just going to cover off really quickly, because I'm aware that we're probably going to go over time again. Some of the major stresses that are put onto our modern horses, and one of the big ones is the stress of transport. It's something that we do really often. We're always traveling our horses, going to events, which is great, but we do actually need to help our horses in these situations, because what we do is we put our horse under psychological stress, and the horse, like Linda said, has an ability to cope with a certain amount of stress, but if it gets too much, then that's when things start to unravel, and that's when we see effects on things like the gut. So the other thing that you do when you transport your horse, for example, is your horse might not be eating for some time. So then things like that are going to add to that stress on the horse. And that in turn is then going to put stress on the gut. So you can see how it's just a kind of, it just adds and adds and adds, and all these stresses start to have an effect. So what have we got here? So we've got, sorry, no, you're fine. So yeah, so we've got that stress on the gut. We've got heat stress. We've got when a horse goes off their feed, it's actually a huge stress in more ways than one. And so this is why we should never restrict food. But even if we have food always available, if a horse loses their appetite and that may have happened because of stress that we've put them under in the first place, then that leads to other stresses. It's really important to note that high starch diets have a huge impact on gut health. And not only, we've known for a long time that they affect the gut microbiome, but they may also kind of have an effect on the horse displaying physical stresses. So then the horse might present, cantering on the wrong lead, things like that, because we've caused inflammation, we've caused pain back there, and then we can cause these shifts in our microbes in the hindgut, which is really not a good thing. So I'm sure every nutritionist harps on about it all the time, but the best thing that you can do to prevent this is to keep your horse's gut healthy by feeding a high fiber based diet, and then also supporting it when you can.
Nice segue to this slide.
Pardon?
Nice segue to this slide.
Yeah. So what does that mean for us as horse owners? I think we really do underestimate stress for our horses, and all the ways that we might be putting stress on our horse. And if we think about taking our horse to a show, think what that involves. You're taking them often away from their mates in the paddock. You're then putting them on a float or a truck, and they're not able to often eat or drink for a period of time. You then go into a new environment. Then even so much as your horses might be out grazing at that event, and they've never picked up these types of pastures before, so there's another stress. And then all of a sudden they're in an environment where it's like a party, and or there's horses everywhere that they've never seen before. That's stressful. So we need to know how to kind of minimize the effect that these events or these stressful events are going to have on our horses. So really thinking about how to manage your horses whilst at events and whilst traveling, and maintaining consistency around their nutrition program is really key. Cool, so we've covered most of this already, so I'll just quickly go through it. We want to feed lots of good quality fibre. We want to make sure that we're meeting the requirement, and at times of year, I don't know what your guys' grass situation is at the moment, but we're starting to come into winter over here. Even though grass looks like there's still decent amounts around, especially when we get lots of rainfall, we know that the nutrient quality in that pasture will definitely drop during winter. It's often much more full of water, so the horse can't actually meet its requirements, so we need to supplement them. It's really important to know that a lot of horses don't actually have a requirement for a hard feed as such. And this is why products like Digestive VM that's just come out fairly recently are such a game changer, because it gives the ability for a horse owner to still feed just a fiber-based diet, not put a hard feed in when they don't need one. So we're not putting stresses onto the gut. We're not putting grain-based feeds in where we don't need them, but we're just topping up their vitamins and minerals. And that's often all we need. And then we really want to give that gut, that horse's gut, some extra support. So using something like EQ or the new RP for really, stressful situations or situations where we are, the horse is in high performance or they are getting fed a lot of grain, is going to make a huge difference. So what can we do travel-wise? It's really important to make sure your horse always has access to the same forage that they have at home. And I can't stress this enough. Please take your own hay, take your own forages with you when you're traveling. If you can, and if your horse tolerates lucerne okay, which most actually do if their gut is functioning well, then this is a really great natural buffer because it helps buffer the stomach acid. It's really high in calcium. So it's actually the gold standard in terms of a forage to use for traveling and for horses in general. The only times where lucerne wouldn't be, my first pick would be if you've got a horse that's severely overweight and couldn't do with the extra calories. But aside from that, it's low in starch and sugar. It's a really nice, safe forage for most horses. Use stress paste before and after travel. This is this is where I'll use your term, Linda, game changer. When this product came to New Zealand and I started using it with clients, I was just amazed. I've got clients that use it, for taking their horses to even just to lessons, to events, when they're under stressful situations. If their horse stops eating at events, you were here, Linda, when I had a client of mine, their horse stopped eating at an event, and everything the person tried until trying stress paste didn't work. They tried stress paste, within a few hours the horse was eating, and that's right. And we mentioned earlier about when they stop eating, it's just it's a recipe for disaster. So we really want to avoid that. Do make sure that your horses stay hydrated as well. So you can do that by taking water from home. There are some additives that you can add to the water to entice them to drink as well. Feeding high moisture feeds can really help, because even if a horse goes off drinking water, then you know that they're getting some hydration through their feed. And yeah, I already mentioned about the bugs in the hind gut. So exercise is probably the other key time, and it's similar to transport in that we want to help safeguard the horse when we're exercising them. So please give them forage right up until you're riding them. It's safe to do so. If you can do it with lucerne, it's gold standard, like I say. But Linda mentioned about the stomach, and we haven't talked much about the stomach tonight, but it's really important when you feed forage before exercising, especially when you're doing a lot of exercise and faster work on them, because we get acid splash in the stomach. And when you put some forage in there prior to the horse exercising, you actually just create, apart from anything else, you actually create a physical barrier. So then the acid can no longer splash. And horses don't have the ability like us they don't have an on-off switch for stomach acid. We do. So when we get hungry, or when there's physically food in our stomach, we produce acid to digest that. The horse, because of how they've evolved, they constantly produce acid. So if when we see horses at events that don't have access to a hay net, it hurts me inside, because I know that they're constantly secreting acid, which might be okay when they're just standing still. But when they start moving around and jumping and cantering and trotting, you imagine that acid's going up and we're going to get ulceration in the stomach.
Yeah.
Right. So what can we do? When we get changes in environmental feed, we also putting more stress on. And I sound like a bit of a maybe negative Nancy here, but it's just trying to point out all the things that can go wrong. So things as simple as removing a paddock mate or changing the paddock scenario can have a huge impact. And I will quite often get clients say, I didn't change anything, I keep following the feed plan. Oh, but so-and-so moved their horse away, or we changed paddocks. And And that can be enough just to put enough stress on the horse, enough stress on their gut to start to see things like weight changes and weight loss and decreased appetite. We want to let them exhibit as many normal kind of behaviors as we can as well. So please let your horses have some time without their covers, let them do some normal grooming. When horses stop eating because they're stressed, it really has a big impact. But when we let them be kind of happy, like these horses, they'll actually, it's amazing how much an effect that will have. And I think this goes without saying now. I think every horse owner knows that we need to do feed changes really slowly and make sure that transitions are slow. But make sure that you also do this with forages. And I know you mentioned this, Linda, which is great because we always think of it, I think, with hard feeds now, and we're pretty good at doing that. But even when we switch from like last season's hay to this season's hay, the makeup can be really different. So always make sure that you do those transitions nice and slow.
Supplements slow as well, except for the vitamin and mineral, but supplements, add them slowly, like EQ. This is your
last. Absolutely. And you might be able to touch on that too, because I know you've got so much experience with introducing EQ and the best way to do that, and even how you've had some success within introducing EQ with stress paste and things for new clients. So make sure that you do your research on supplements too. You kind of get what you pay for. And I do get clients asking me as well, or is there a cheaper one or like a knockoff version that we can use? And I hate to say it, but if you use a knockoff or a cheaper version, you'll get the same kind of result. So knockoff product, knockoff result. So you do actually get what you pay for, especially with supplements, because a lot of the key ingredients in there are expensive. So do your research.
Right. Okay, so I'm just going to jump in. Thanks, Nikita. I mean, we need to have these webinars for 2 hours because you've got so much knowledge. Let's just quickly chat about Poseidon Stress Paste because it's a product. I mean, EQ is our sort of signature product, and Stress Paste is a product that's getting more and more attention now, and it is just fabulous. So is it a calming paste? No, it's not. You mentioned earlier about we create all this stress and then we want to sedate the horse, but the erosion, the gut wall is still happening. But if you support the gut and everything about the horse, then they will be calmer because they're not in pain. The gut's doing what it's got to do. So it's not a calming paste, even though sometimes you'll see it advertised or it's put in the calming paste section. It's not. We do things very differently with Stress Paste. It's not a Band-Aid. Most of the pastes are full of B vitamins or things like tryptophan, which actually doesn't have research to support it, but we reach for it. Remember, if the gut is functioning well, they make their own B vitamins. So we do this differently. And how we do it differently, you saw that long gut, we've got to support the whole gut. When they're stressed, they make more stomach acid, or they could be going long periods of time without feed. So we make sure we do some buffering. There's pectins, there's magnesium hydroxide, so we buffer the stomach. We've got betaine. Betaine is an amazing product that keeps the cell walls hydrated. I spoke about heat stress. A lot of the eventers and the racehorsing industry love Stress Paste, non-swabbable, but it means the horses stay naturally hydrated to avoid that leaky gut. There's postbiotics in there. There is some B vitamins. There's antioxidants. It just goes on and on. It's a different way at looking at how we support the whole gut in times of stress. And Nikita mentioned there the owner whose horse wasn't eating when you're competing. That is so stressful. And when she came back and said, I couldn't believe it, he ate really quickly. It's excellent. These are all the things that are in Stress Paste. There's so much in there. So we've done it differently. And again, it's starting to get traction because people are saying, my horse has never traveled as well. They normally go off their food by day 2, or the recovery. And that's what we're saying. If stress affects the gut, the whole gut, we need to support the whole gut, and we need a whole range of ingredients to do it. There is nothing like it on the market, even though you may hear other companies saying that. There absolutely isn't. And it's not a sedation. It's not working on the nervous system. It's about supporting the whole gut. So when do you use it? Travel. Yes, before, during, after. If you've got long trips, you don't want the stomach getting empty. if they're off their feed, change in weather. And if it gets really hot, you can use it. It's also been really helpful with horses that are getting scoped for ulcers. Check with your vet. People don't want their horses going for a long period of time without something in the stomach. They don't want to increase the risk of gastric ulcers. So people are using it for that, for recovery. Because stress is complex, you need a complex solution, and that's what Stress Paste offers. We've recently brought it out in a pouch because it's become so popular. It's that one item you should keep in your float, in your truck, in your tack box, so that you've always got it. I actually had a client room today and say, I've got 2 sick horses arising. I need 4 boxes of Stress Paste immediately. It's also great when you're starting EQ or RP for the first time. When you introduce a new gut supplement, you want to do it slowly. You don't want to sort of shift the gut microbiome too quickly, because they're often like, these tenants that aren't paying any rent. They're squatters. They don't want to move out. So you do it slowly, but you can give acute support with Stress Paste. Stress Paste is not long-term. At the very most, 2 weeks, if you've got a sick horse, along with your vet, you could use it for 2 weeks. It's short-term acute stress, but it's great. I often recommend 1 Stress Paste a day for, say, 3 or 4 days while you're starting EQ. So if anybody has used it, I'd love to hear about your thoughts, because it's a product we are so proud of. So quickly, what about the other Poseidon supplements? EQ is our foundation one, and it's for everyday gut support. And it's got things for the stomach, for the small intestine, the amino acids. We've added a postbiotic. Then we've made RP, which is for horses' high level of stress. So if they're on a high grain diet or high levels of exercise, like your show jumpers, your eventers, your barrel racers, your race horses, the more stress, the more gut support. So we often say, Nikita often says, RP is EQ on steroids. And that's such a good way to describe it. And what we love is that it is an everyday product, but we've made sure there's no, that we use loosen leaf meal. There are no other fillers. All the ingredients are included at the level they need to be effective, because not every supplement does that. You can look at the list and there's all these things, but they're only little amounts. So we've got everything's backed by science, and the feedback we get from people is absolutely amazing. So if you think about Stress Paste for your acute stress and EQ or RP for every day, it's about supporting the whole gut. EQ just got reformulated. We launched it, say, 5 years ago. Science came out talking about postbiotics. We thought we could do better, so we did. There are not many products that get reformulated so quickly, but we thought we want to deliver the best that we can. Just quickly, we don't use probiotics, which is interesting because so many products have probiotics. Research is not conclusive. There's also question marks about, does it survive the stomach acid? Does it get to the hind gut? Is it the right bacteria? Remember, they're competitive. And does it survive shelf life? What you want is the metabolites that probiotics make, a postbiotic. We've added them in. So again, science changes, we change with it. RP has just come out and it is just taking off. It's exciting. VM, Nikita spoke about, it's kind of like the unsung hero of the group. It's literally a vitamin and mineral supplement with a bit of gut support through the pre and postbiotic and amino acids, highly palatable. You don't have to feed much. And Nikita and I did a webinar last week where she spoke about how much she loves it, because all the diet she puts it into, it balances. You'd be surprised to know that not all vitamin and mineral supplements on the market will balance. So it's all in there. And it's, it's people who love it, they love using it. If you've got a fiber-based diet, gut support with the EQ, use your variety of fiber, add your VM. For most horses, that's all they need. If you need high energy, there are some amazing feeds out there. And Nikita and I spoke last week about how we want to do a webinar about how to read feed labels so that you can, again, be informed and make choices. So EQ is very different to other ones on the market. We've got high levels of amino acids. That's the pulling the gut together. We've got 2 types of buffering. I've mentioned the pre and postbiotic. So it is very different. Yes, there are more and more gut supplements coming on the market, but as Nikita said, do your research, do your homework, read the labels, contact the company. I love talking about gut health. Ring me. I'll chat to you about it. I'll explain why we do things the way we do. I think we've covered this. If your horse is under stress, or you're competing, traveling, if they're getting older, you want good gut health all the time.
I think we've established as well, Linda, if I can just jump in, that most horses in this day and age are under some type of stress. So it's not like digestive EQ, for example, is just for those horses that you think, oh, they've got a problem here. It's actually for your everyday horse, because if you look at them and think, okay, what stresses are they under? And I kind of challenge everyone to go and do that. You'd be surprised how many stresses they're under. So think of it as, you're helping them. They help us so much. They help us with our mental health. They help us with all sorts of things. So we kind of owe it to them as well to do that.
Yep, thank you. Nikita, Abby's just mentioned there's a few questions coming through. Would
Yep.
you mind just having a look at those while I just keep moving?
Yeah, sure.
RP, I think we've covered that again. It is like EQ, but higher levels, and there's extra amino acids and higher digestive enzymes. So it's about saying if your horse is under more stress, it's higher risk of leaky gut. So we need to do everything we can to support that. And interestingly enough, clients that have been long-term users of EQ that we've switched over to RP have gone, wow, I didn't think I could get better results, but I have. But again, that's the power of the gut. Work with the gut. We've got to stop having Band-Aids, and we haven't talked about gastric ulcer treatment today. We've done previous webinars on that, which will be on our website, but we've got to stop thinking that gut health is all about the stomach and just reaching for omeprazole all the time. It's got its role to play, but it's got to be in context, and it's got to be backed by, I guess, the risk factors and why you've got ulcers in the first place. Spoken about VM. So I think we're doing really well. We're nearly at time. We have covered a lot of information, and the good thing is that we can send the recording out. We have got so much information on our website, but I'm really excited because Horseland have generously decided to offer this. If you stay to the end, and when I'm looking at the numbers, everyone has, so great job. If you use this code tomorrow, Poseidon Web, when you go into the store, they'll give you 10% off our entire range. And if you haven't used EQ or RP before, I would really highly recommend that you start with some stress paste. However, if your horse, is doing pretty well, and even after tonight, you're kind of going, there's nothing obvious happening, then just use the EQ and just slowly do it. So we like to increase up over a 2-week period, start with a quarter of the dose and slowly build up. All on our website. But if you've got a horse that right now is off its food, maybe loose manure, cranky, girthy, having trouble with canter leads, or you've got events coming up, then that's when I would highly recommend that you start with the stress pace while you bring in the other products. So it's, we're delivering to you the best products that science can tell us we can at the moment. And we're just so happy that we're bringing this whole gut health and stress to everyone's awareness. So, Nikita, do we need to jump and look at these questions?
I'm typing some responses, or did you want me to kind of go through them? I was just typing to each one. I'm pretty sure that's how they get to them, but I can cover a couple. So I just answered a question that Megan had around bute, and absolutely that can cause some stress on the horse's gut. We especially know that it has an effect on the stomach and the foregut, but also the reason that your horse was on bute, which I'm not sure of, but that may have caused some stress to begin with as well, because if we've got an injury or something like that, then those are also things that can contribute to stress.
On the bute, Nikita, too, there's some emerging research saying a combination of bute and omeprazole can be lethal. So It's a very small sample size, and we don't know enough about it, but the group that was in this trial was pretty catastrophic. So I would not be strongly asking your vet if you're using bute any sort of gastric ulcer treatment, because it can create major problems.
Yeah. No, there's all sorts of things that bute can be attributable to in terms of stress. So I would, this horse she said has had hindgut acidosis, and now they've fixed it, thankfully. So that's great news. But yeah, bute definitely can have an effect. I've got another question here from Claire about if I'm assuming she's asking about stress paste, if it can be given to horses that are fasted for medical treatment. Absolutely, and it's something that I wish that all vet clinics actually did here, and I'm hoping in the next few years they will be, as we kind of get around them and educate them about stress paste. It's actually amazing in terms of it providing a protective kind of barrier and coating in the stomach. So it's really going to help for those horses that aren't eating. And we know that we have to fast horses to scope them, which is a risk in itself. So yeah, anything that we can do to line the gut without putting food in there is going to be amazing. And stress paste is really the only thing that I know of that we can do that with.
We know lots of vets are actually doing that. So, but again, we always say check with your vet. If they've got any concerns, they can contact us. But yeah, absolutely. Because sometimes people don't want to scope because they're worried about fasting. So, and also they're sedated. They're not allowed to eat after they've been sedated. So it gives them something after that as well.
Yeah, I get it all the time. Clients not wanting to scope, but you know, we actually do need to scope if we suspect ulcers, so that we know where the ulcers are, what type of ulcers we're dealing with, because the treatment will vary depending on those factors. So we used to kind of do, I don't know if you do in Australia still, but we still do it here, what we call like treatment trials, where we'll just put that horse on some treatment to see if it works. But now the advice is to actually scope first. And yes, we do have to fast the horses for a period of time. But for example, if you give them some stress paste, then you kind of counteract those negative effects of fasting.
Yeah, I might jump in and answer the next one from Raylene. Is there any side effects? There usually isn't, but probably out of the hundreds and hundreds of horses have used it, we've had the odd horse that's had a bit of loose manure. It could be due to the magnesium. I would highly recommend that you trial it before you actually go. So, I mean, that's anything though. If you've got a big event coming up, don't leave it to the event to give them a paste or something for the first time. And every horse responds differently, even though we'll say a whole tube for a horse 400, 600 kilos, that we have clients that have gone, I give them that, and I actually found they were so chilled out, I can give them a little bit less. It depends what you're using it for. So, but there should not be any side effects. If any of our products create any side effects that are unwanted, please contact us. We have amazing nutritionists like Nikita. We've got 2 others that we work with as well. We have vets, we have microbiologists. So if something's not going right, if you don't let us know, we can't do anything about it. And often there's an underlying issue. So we've got a great team to try and understand what could be happening. But again, not really side effects, and it's also non-swabbable. Okay, the next one. Look, I think, actually, Nikita, this is more of a nutritional one. I'll get you to answer this one. About the question is, would the stress paste also be good for a horse that lives 24/7 in a paddock and gets loose stool in the beginning of spring because of the pasture changes?
That situation is often caused by kind of increasing water content, and then increasing, sometimes we get more sugar content as well with the pasture changing, and so often we get that kind of loose stool response. I would probably more reach for using like EQ in that situation. I'm not sure about you, Linda, but as a kind of more sustainable approach, so that we avoid that happening in the first place. And what EQ and prebiotics are great for is really maintaining a stable gut environment too. So it actually helps the horse as we change their diet, sometimes with going away to events, changing paddocks, changing season. It actually helps the bugs in the gut cope with that change better. As well as that, you want to make sure that you're feeding some varied fiber sources as we change seasons too. So things like hay that are, have lower moisture content, some alternative forages in there, so that the the pasture change isn't causing such a big catastrophic event for that horse too. So I would probably advise to use EQ through that transition period.
Could there also be some mycotoxin issues as part of that? Could that be part of it coming into spring?
Yeah. I mean, mycotoxins are always one of those things that can be a factor as well. But often coming into spring, I usually find it's a result of the sugars and or the moisture level changing in the pasture.
Okay, excellent. Susan, no, you don't have to use EQ and VM together. Absolutely not. They're very different products. If you're feeding complete feed, for example, if you were feeding Pride's Easy Sport, which is a complete feed, and you're feeding it to the amount that the manufacturers say you need to feed it, you don't need VM. But EQ is obviously the gut support. But what we do find is that we can feed more simply. So you might not have to feed a complete feed. You might feed Loop and Pack from Pride's. I'm just picking Pride's because I do love their feeds. And then you can then feed a vitamin mineral. One of the things that I love about having the vitamin minerals separate is if I want to increase or decrease the protein content, I'm now not impacting on the vitamins and minerals. So that, you know, a great tip is after exercise, you can give some extra protein, maybe lupin or soy meal. If you've got a complete feed, you're adding everything, and it's not always good to have more of some of the vitamins and minerals. So they can be fed separately, but we think they go really well together. We do have a free feed program on our website called Feed Assist, where you can just put your diet in and just see whether you're meeting your nutritional requirements. So, Abby, I don't know if you've got time to put that link in the chat box. We might send out the email, or you can go to a nutritionist like Nikita who will do that for you so that we can feed more economically and more effectively.
And the other thing with VM, just really quickly, that it's great for is because, you know, being a nutritionist and formulating feeds for a long time, is that we actually formulate them. So the feeding rates that you see on the back of the bags, you'll often think are quite high. So say if it says like 2 or 3 kilos or 4 kilos, then that is usually the feeding rate that will give you the vitamins and minerals that your horse needs. So if you're feeding less than that, so if you're feeding, say, 1 kilo, or sometimes people are just feeding a handful, you're all of a sudden not getting a complete feed from your complete feed. So you may want to look at using something like VM, where you're not using the specified feeding rates, because those feeding rates are typically established to meet vitamin and mineral requirement.
Excellent. Look, I can't thank everybody enough. This is great. Great question. There's some beautiful comments coming through. We've just asked Abby to randomly pick out 2 names of people that have stayed to the end. So we have Sonia Wilson and Nicole Carlos. So if you could please send an email through to us, so then we can organise to get the product to you. And then don't forget, for everybody else, if I just go back to this slide, if you go into the store tomorrow, you can use that code and get 10% off. And please, if you are using our products, let us know what your thoughts are, what results you're seeing or getting. And if you decide to use them for the first time, we'd also love to hear about it. Nikita, thank you so much, as always. We did a webinar last week in New Zealand. We loved it. It's so great. I always learn something new from you, and
me too.
It's just fabulous. So thank you so much for that. Again, thank you to Horseland for organising this and asking us to come along and share our knowledge. Huge shout out to my team, Poseidon, Abby, for joining us tonight. Abby's got 2 young kids too, so she's stood up to help us. And thank you so much for all of you for being the responsible horse owners that give up your time to come along and learn something. And one last request, I'd love to hear, you can put in the chat, or you can email us, probably email because we're about to close the webinar, just one thing you learned tonight, because we just want to make sure that what we're delivering is of value and that you're getting something useful out of it. And also great for us to know what information really resonates, because we could talk all night about stress. It's hard to cover all of it, but really keen to know what was important for you. So thank you, everyone. Have a great night, and let's hope that we can keep enjoying our beautiful horses and we can manage their stress so we're less stressed. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.